Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings. I'm here with Dan Schneier. Dan, welcome back to the show. We always miss you when you're gone for a few weeks.
I'm glad to be back. I love talking Dynasty football with you. A few of my friends were like, when are you joining Dynasty again? It's like, actually today. They asked me today. I was like, actually today. And I'm excited because I get to talk quarterbacks, tight ends. Quarterback's probably my favorite position to discuss in Dynasty. So I'm very excited to talk some football with you and get back in the mix.
We are going to talk quarterback rankings 1 through 24. We'll talk tight end rankings 1 through 24. We'll do kind of the same thing we did at running back and wide receiver, where Dan can tell us who he's higher on than me. Dan, I framed it as your guy in the rundown, but we'll basically just show the top 12 and you say, you know what? I love this guy, especially at this cost. Or you can just say, man, Heath, you're an idiot. Why are you so low on this guy? And because we're going to go through two different positions, we're just going to jump right into it before the break here with QB 1 through 12. And we'll just make people mad right off the start because Josh Allen is not in my top two. QB1, Patrick Mahomes. QB2, Jalen Hurts. Then Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow, Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Brock Purdy. Again, the top 12 quarterbacks for me in Dynasty: Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, Jackson, Stroud, Burrow, Richardson, Murray, Herbert, Williams, Daniels, Purdy. And I think I know the answer to this question, Dan, but who's your guy in these rankings?
Well, I'm not sure you know the answer because I think you know the answer based on some of the rookie drafts we've done. And he is one of my guys and my guy for sure. But my real guy in this rankings based on where he's ranked and not just where you rank him, Heath, but where I've been able to get him in some dynasty startups we've done and even some redrafts is Justin Herbert. That's my guy on this list, Justin Herbert. This is for me, prime time to buy Justin Herbert. And I think that a lot about Justin Herbert's rookie season when I think about why I want to buy him now and why I see him as such a value. Rookie season, didn't have Rashawn Slater. Honestly, at the same time, had about 2-3 injuries on the offensive line, if I can remember. They were ranked second or third worst offensive line in the entire NFL. And yet, Justin Herbert threw 31 touchdowns and 4,600 yards. And he did so with guys like Jalen Guyton. 3 touchdowns, 511 yards. Jalen Guyton, Tyron Johnson is what I was thinking of. 3 touchdowns to Donald Parham. Lit it up for 31 touchdowns. Now everyone's assuming that, oh, wait, Keenan Allen's gone. Mike Williams is gone. Yeah, those were his 2 leading receivers that year, but no one topped 1,000 yards that season. And what I'm looking at when I think of this draft class and how it impacts Justin Herbert is, why are we so down on the decision to pass on a wide receiver? It's not like they went up and drafted an Aaron Donald type at defensive tackle. No, they drafted Joe Alt, who by all means is a better pass protector than run blocker from what I've seen on film, in addition to being the 10th most athletic offensive tackle in the history of the combine. That's over 1,000 people have ever tested at the combine. We could be looking at one of the best 1-2 offensive tackle tandems in the NFL with Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater heading into 2024. That's going to have an impact on the play action passing game. That's going to have an impact on the offense overall. I think it's trending up for Justin Herbert, despite all the scared money when it comes to Jim Harbaugh joining that offense and what it's going to do for it. I think there's going to be play action opportunities. I think his arm talent is undeniable. And if he's fully healthy for the first time in 3 years, Heath, we could see more of the running that we saw early in his career because he is an athletic prospect as well, especially off play action with some bootleg action and some opportunities there to get out on the outside, use his legs, zone read in the red zone, things of that nature with Greg Roman in there. And we've seen that all with Lamar Jackson as well. So if there's even a little uptick in the rushing yards and the red zone rushing, in addition to what I think we're going to get from him just from an efficiency standpoint, I think we're going to be talking about him next year in the top 5 of the quarterbacks again. And yet right now you can buy him really low. So if we're talking about my guy, that's my guy.
I love it. Now, Miguel says in the chat, concerned Herbert will have a few dud games with an easy schedule. They might gain a lead and run the ball to death. Mr. Popinski says, fade Greg Roman. It's simple.
Well, what about with Lamar?
Is Justin Herbert going to run for 1,000 yards?
No, probably not.
That is the thing. And it has, for me, way less to do with the passing on a wide receiver in round 1. Although I do think he has definitely the worst set of pass catchers he's ever had in his career, and a bottom 10 in the NFL, maybe bottom 5. Like it's really bad. Unless Ladd McConkey just shows up and is immediately a good number 1 wide receiver. Otherwise, the best pass catcher is Josh Palmer or Will Dissly or like maybe Quentin Johnston is going to turn into, but like it's a really terrible receiving core. And that's not even the thing that scares me the most. It's that when you look at Greg Roman's offenses, there's 1 year out of 10 where he did not finish 28th or worse in team pass attempts. And you compare that to Justin Herbert, who over the last 2 seasons has averaged 39.5 pass attempts per game. Now, you mentioned the efficiency, and I think that's where the room is. We've seen Brock Purdy in the 49ers offense be just like 8.5, 9 yards per attempt. He can be a good fantasy starter even without throwing the ball 35 times a game. Herbert's efficiency as a passer is just flat out mediocre. Career 7.1 yards per pass attempt, 4.7% touchdown rate, just very, very close to average. Now maybe that's because he threw so many passes to Austin Eckler and that hurt the efficiency numbers because he does have a high completion rate. I do think there's a hope that the play action stuff, they run the ball so effectively that he can just have a wildly efficient season. And that's maybe not priced into my rankings, but I also think if he throws the ball 580 times, I think I'll be surprised.
Yeah, I don't think that any of that was unfair, Heath. I think one thing that you brought up, though, that I did want to touch on is the efficiency aspect, because I do think there's a different level of efficiency coming from that offense, that Lombardi offense, where everything was checked down to Austin Eckler versus this type of offense, which I don't know, but I think is going to be, when I mean efficiency, it's going to be a lot of running, play action, and vertical shots off the play action. And that gets back to a little bit. Who do those go to? Well, that's the question. It has to be Josh Palmer, who has to be utilized in a different way. And he was a vertical receiver at Tennessee. That's what I really liked about him, is deep ball tracking. And then Quentin Johnston, who was supposed to be a vertical receiver, has not proven so yet, but was a vertical receiver at TCU, could potentially get back to that level. But the idea is that there will be opportunities in the vertical game based off of the run game and the play action and the way that the system is set up. In a lot of ways, it reminds me kind of what, at least I'm hoping for, what we saw his rookie season. It was a different system before Lombardi got there. It was better for him. He was taking those vertical shots downfield. He was utilizing that rare arm talent that he has, and I know he has. I still think when I watch him play football, if I look at this list of quarterbacks, if I'm starting an NFL franchise, there's really only 4 or 5 guys that I would take over him to start an NFL franchise right now for what I'm trying to build an NFL franchise around, which is that kind of arm talent, that ability to fit tight windows, to make throws at all levels of the field. That may be a problem for Dynasty, or at least for year one, but I think ultimately they're going to shape this offense around Herbert. I know that's a big debate right now. Will they shape it around Harbaugh's image and Roman's image and how they've done it in the past? Or will they shape it around the quarterback they have? I just tend to believe, and maybe this is, Heath, this is too much, what's it called, cautious optimism, or just, bias. Right. I don't know. But I believe that he went there, Harbaugh, because of Herbert. And I don't think they're going to neuter his skill set, but we'll see what happens there.
All right. So we do have a rankings debate involving maybe a quarterback that actually has a worse receiving core than Justin Herbert now.
Yeah.
It's Jalen Hurts versus Josh Allen. And I know that, like, after Joe Brady took over the offense, Josh Allen was still awesome for fantasy. He also ran for 15 touchdown passes last year, or 15 rushing touchdowns last year. We don't expect that to happen. He lost Diggs. He lost Gabe Davis. They've replaced him with Keon Coleman and MVS and Curtis Samuel. That's basically it, right? Not exactly exciting. And I do expect... I think, first off, like, where are you on Allen versus Hurts? And then these guys are 28 and 26 or will be week 1. For a pocket passer, true pocket passer, that age doesn't really matter that much to me. That 2-year difference probably doesn't matter. But does it matter when so much of their production has come on the ground?
That's a great question. And I think you have to look at each individual sometimes, because it's always been the debate, at least in my mind, with Derrick Henry, right? Derrick Henry should have been done by now, by a long time from now. I mean, he's had the workload, he's had the hits, but he's kind of that athletic freak. And I almost view Josh Allen in that sense. 6'5", just an absolute freak of an athlete. I'm not so sure I'd view Jalen Hurts in that sense, to be completely honest, based on his frame and based on his athleticism. He's done a good job converting to rushing touchdowns, a lot to do with, the way the Eagles have found a way to kind of game the system in some ways. And maybe that will still be there. Maybe that won't with Jason Kelce retired. We don't know yet. That remains to be seen. But I think I have to look at that individually based on the player. And I have a little bit more confidence in kind of betting on that outlier like we got with Derrick Henry or Josh Allen. That, again, feels risky even to just say out loud, Heath. But I will say this, in the debate, Josh Allen versus Jalen Hurts, for me, it is no debate. I have Josh Allen considerably higher than Hurts. Hurts would not even be my QB3 personally. I have some reservations with Hurts. And, we all do things differently in the fantasy industry. I have different ways of evaluating. You have different ways of evaluating. One way I evaluate is based on the tape. That's the main way I lean on. And there are big concerns I have that I think Jalen Hurts will be able to answer this year, Heath, but I'm not certain he'll be able to answer. And I know that with Josh Allen, I don't have those concerns and I don't have any questions to answer. So here's the questions I'm going to need Jalen Hurts to answer. What I'm going to need to answer is this. Around the midpoint season last week, we heard Nick Bosa, the 49ers, say, look, there's a way to beat Jalen Hurts. Watch the tape of what we just did against the Eagles this game. What you do is you don't rush him the way you rush every other passer. You rush him in a certain way that doesn't open up the B gap and the A gap for this quarterback to run through the middle and take that A gap or that B gap. And after that, from that point on, we saw Jalen Hurts struggle a lot. We saw the Eagles offense struggle a lot against teams that weren't very good, like the Giants and some of these other teams that found a way to completely shut down their offense, because when you rush the passer in a certain way that doesn't allow for the A gap or the B gap to be run through, and this is a problem that Justin Fields has had, Daniel Jones has had, now Jalen Hurts as well. What it does is it requires the quarterback to win from the pocket as a true pocket passer, utilizing the middle of the field because you're taking away the outs. That's where Jalen Hurts does his best work, outside the numbers. Now he has to win in the middle of the field with timing-based precision and velocity and accuracy. Or his other option is, because there's no A gap or B gap anymore, the way they're rushing the passer, to roll out to his right. And we saw that a lot with Jalen Hurts. And what does that do? It cuts off half the field and it makes it really difficult to keep an offense moving. So I need that question answered personally, Heath, and I want to see that answered on tape this year. I think he will answer that. My guess is he will answer that. But I don't have that question with Josh Allen. I don't have the question with a couple other guys on this list. So I'm a little bit scared of Jalen Hurts moving forward. I am not as high on him as other people are. I know the points have been there. The production has been there. The fantasy production is there. We can look at history and say, why would we not have him 2 or 3 based on what he's done? But I want to see what he's going to do moving forward. And that's where I'm a little less concerned. I do like that they have the receivers locked up. The offensive line, it does scare me a little bit because Jason Kelce retired and Lane Johnson is very close to retirement there. And at some point, the salary cap bubble has to break there. I don't know how Howie Roseman does what he does, Heath. I don't really understand it. But at some point, when you're loading up across the board on the roster with all these new contracts, at some point, someone's going to have to get cut. We saw this happen with Dallas when they had to move on from Amari Cooper as well. So we'll see what happens there, Heath, but I have my concerns with Hurts.
Let's take a short break and we'll get into QB 13 through 24.
My primary function is to create a balance and avoid a war.
There's some new players in town, and they brought the plague.
Why are you back?
Because I missed you.
When I act, I do so with purpose.
You got my attention. You don't want that. What happened to Kingston?
2 more days and I get to watch Mayor of Kingstown. I can't wait. It's going to be fantastic. Oh my gosh. You got to get caught up so you're ready for the next season. It's spectacular. All right, QB 13 through 24 now.
Do you share any concerns on Hurts, or is that not a possibility for you?
No, I also have, like I said, I have concerns about him and Allen.
Allen
my concerns
more receiving
about
based.
What
is Allen more? Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of his production last year was rushing touchdowns.
Right.
I'm not sure that he has basically one season as a truly elite passer. And he's got some really good passing seasons with 600 yards rushing. I think the argument that you made about Allen's body and being able to just handle the beating that he's taken at this age, you could still make about Cam Newton. and
True.
that deteriorated very quickly. So that's I guess I don't have as much concern about CJ Stroud, because I have concerns about Lamar too, and how his game's going to age. But Stroud just doesn't have the upside of Hurts or Allen or Jackson, so
Right.
they go higher in the rankings. I mostly think that blip in the second half last year for the Eagles, which you described very well, is something they will address, and I'm not that concerned about it. I think they had some pretty bad coaching last year.
Yeah, the coordinator situation was not good, so I will give that.
Let's get to QB 13 through 24. Now, this is the point where I expect some wild disagreements, especially from the chat. Once you get out of the top 12 at all, it's happened at every position so far. It'll definitely happen at tight end, because who cares after the top 12? But QB 13 through 24, Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, JJ McCarthy, Jordan Love, Bryce Young, Dak Prescott, Drake May, Will Levis, Jared Goff, Justin Fields, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers. Again, that's QB 13 through 24. We've got Tua, Lawrence, McCarthy, Love, Young, Prescott, May, Levis, Goff, Fields, Watson, Rodgers. Who's your guy in this section, Dan?
I have some major disagreements as well. Do we want to do my guy first or my major disagreements?
No, I want to hear who you like.
Okay.
My guy, be positive.
Let's start positive here. My two my guys, according to versus consensus or versus the rankings here. I'll start with the bottom of the list. It's Drake May. This is a quarterback who I had a conviction on in his draft class. I watched so much of his tape at UNC, not just the 2023, but the 2022 as well, as a true freshman at UNC, where he was just phenomenal when he actually had a good coordinator and he actually didn't lose 180 of his decent targets that he didn't have last season. And his arm talent's phenomenal, Drake May, but really it's his playmaking ability. And don't sleep on his ability to impact fantasy football as a rusher. He had 700 plus rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns in 2022 as a freshman, while going on a streak of 300-yard games and 5 touchdowns for 4 games in a row, breaking the ACC record. I think he's been kind of beaten down a little bit because of the footwork issues, but those are the things that were also kind of knocked for Josh Allen coming into the NFL, and that's the easiest thing to fix. What you can't fix is arm talent. Is the Patriots situation the best in the NFL? No, it's probably the worst he could have joined, but this is Dynasty I'm talking about, and I believe in the talent, and I believe that he's one of the best quarterback prospects that I've personally studied in recent classes. That doesn't mean he's at the level of a Trevor Lawrence or some of these great guys we've had, Joe Burrow, but compared to the guys like Bryce Young and some of those guys, I really think he's a step above. So he'd be my first. The other two I'm going to quickly touch on are Jordan Love. Love his situation around him. They've built so well around him. I mean, no team drafts in the middle rounds at wide receiver like the Green Bay Packers can draft in the middle to late rounds at wide receiver. It's phenomenal. And then they also do things like draft Zach Tom out of Wake Forest in the 4th round. And he's now one of the better right tackles in the NFL, especially in pass protection. So I love the situation, and I love some of the arm talent I saw from Jordan Love on tape last year, the ability to get the football out on time with velocity. Then finally, I'm not going to quit Trevor Lawrence yet, Heath. I just can't do it, especially when you give him a first-round talent at wide receiver. Again, like the evaluation I had on him coming out of Clemson, it's still stuck in my mind. Maybe I have to get it out of my mind, but I also remember 2 years ago, not last year, the year before, this torrid stretch he had. The Ravens.
It was like 4 good games in a row.
Like 4 great games in a row.
Tua's never done that.
Yeah, exactly. And Tua
was QB4 8 weeks into last year, like half of a season as QB4.
Pretty amazing.
And that is the guy I get the most hatred about, is why do you have Tua so high?
You shouldn't get the hatred for having Tua so high, especially with the weapons that he has around him. My 2 issues are always when it comes to fantasy playoffs time and the weather turns, but that's one thing. But yeah, those would be the 3 guys. And then one guy I would say I have ranked a little bit higher than you have is Jared Goff, especially after the contract extension.
So I immediately get why the Jordan Love hatred, Heath, and I'd probably try to get Love and Dak inside the top 12. I don't have anything against Jordan Love. I'm a little bit skeptical of the way he did what he did last year. It was pretty touchdown rate based in terms of the fantasy production. He had a 5.5% touchdown rate, which was much higher than you would have expected. He scored 4 rushing touchdowns on I think 50 rush attempts. Again, much higher than what you would have expected. And we've got what now, 24 games of it from Brock Purdy.
Yes.
Where he surprised us with how good he was. We've got like 16 from Jordan Love, 17 maybe from Jordan Love. So I just need to see just a little bit more. And I think that Tua, Lawrence, Love group is first off, I would say the difference between even go up one more to Purdy to Love they are in a tier, and it's a very tight tier. I wouldn't argue that strongly for anybody within that tier for me over the other one. But I'm not 100% sure that Tua, Trevor Lawrence, and Jordan Love are all just going to get these mega contracts and be starter. Like one of these guys, there's a little bit of risk still. And I think it's especially for Love if he doesn't start the first month of this next season the way that he did last year. And then I don't know. You talked about how good they are at getting wide receivers, and they've got a bunch of them. Like they've got a bunch of guys that are at least wide receiver 3s in an NFL offense. I don't know that they have a number 1, and I'm not sure who I'm sure is a number 2.
I have a little bit higher. I feel like they're all at the level of number 2 from what I've seen on, at least from just my evaluation of watching.
You're saying Jaden Reed, Christian Watson,
Wicks and Dobbs. Like Dobbs last year on tape was good at getting open. That's right. 2 level for me. Now that it's not like the high end 2. It's not the Higgins of the world, but it's I can get open for you consistently within your offense, help you stay on time as a quarterback, let you get the ball out on time within the system, and that will lead to yards.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then as far as the Drake May stuff, you were higher on him than I was before the draft. I was pretty clear that whatever quarterback landed with the Patriots, I was probably going to be out on, because we've seen situations destroy quarterback prospects. And we've seen few quarterbacks fall into a worse situation than this one. Just complete unproven offensive staff, absolutely no help at wide receiver, and probably going to lose 14 games. That's what worries me with him. You don't have much hope for a year 2 bounce back from Bryce Young?
I don't have much hope for a year 2 bounce. I shouldn't say that. I have a little bit of hope for Bryce Young. I'm not that down on that Bryce Young ranking. I would have May ahead of him just because I like his talent more and don't think the situation is that it's different right now. It's just kind of like the Panthers are a year ahead of where the Patriots are right now, but I'm not going to use that fully against him. It's just more of the evaluation I had on them before the draft, and it's only a year outside of that. I didn't think he had special arm talent like Drake May had on the vertical passing game, and I didn't love his rushing ability at the NFL level. And his size is the real factor there with Bryce Young that kills me from a dynasty standpoint. That frame is just really hard to imagine it holding up over the course of an NFL career and being, a true starter. The only guys we've had, and this goes for McCarthy too, there's 3 guys that fit into this billing. One that is not on this list, and Jaden Daniels, but there's Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, and Bryce Young. All 3 of them fit into the billing. Now, I know at the combine they had fake weight on, that you could see it in McCarthy's face. It wasn't real weight. Same thing for Jaden Daniels. But reality is they're all going to play at 205 or under. And the only quarterbacks to ever have success at the NFL level at 205 or under are 3 seasons from Kirk Cousins and 1 season from Jeff Garcia. Those are the only successful seasons we've ever had from a quarterback at 205 or under.
Did Cousins come off of that list because he gained weight?
He might
have had 3 seasons.
Yeah, I think
that's what I'm saying. Like, I would expect, especially McCarthy. Like, Young's a couple of years older now, so maybe not.
Jaden's 24. I don't think.
Jaden may not add it either. McCarthy doesn't have his man strength yet.
Hopefully, that's hopefully the case because he's so young. But that frame doesn't.
Right.
I don't see. I worry about that frame being able to put on weight as well, personally, but he should be able to.
So my rankings dilemma, and I could have just put Brock Purdy versus Tua versus Lawrence versus McCarthy versus Love, but I went with McCarthy versus Love because they were the closest within that. I know how much you've already said that Love's too low. So how do you view McCarthy versus maybe like Bryce Young?
Yeah, I'm not a McCarthy guy at all for Dynasty personally. I saw some moment. I had to study him a lot because the Giants were interested. I saw some moments that are interesting from him. He can really rip the ball in the intermediate level of the field. Good timing there. Throws a good anticipation there. But that deep throwing, I mean, it's a real issue for him. And throwing to his left is another real issue for him. And I'm not sold that that's going to fix itself at the NFL level. And, he really seemed to have to use his whole body to throw into 3 hitches, whole body into a lot of throws. That scares me as well. When you get to the NFL level, it's going to be even harder to throw the football down the field and outside the numbers because the field is condensed, the players are faster, everything like that. It's not the Big Ten anymore. So I just have major concerns about McCarthy as an overall quarterback prospect. The same would go for Levis. These are two quarterbacks that just, I don't know where I would rank them, but I know I wouldn't rank them probably within my top 24.
I do think that like the McCarthy May thing is a great test of how much does coaching matter?
Yeah.
How much does the fact that he's going to be throwing to guys who are wide open matter? Like JJ McCarthy's job is much easier. His path to fantasy relevance is much, much smoother. He's probably going to get to throw the ball if they both start week 1, I would guess he throws the ball 150 more times than Drake May this year. 100%. Probably scores. Yeah. And everything's easier for him. If May overcomes this, it will be very, very impressive.
And Levis is another example. He has an amazing situation around him now, too, after they added Calvin Ridley and another offensive lineman in the first round, like back-to-back first-round picks on offensive line. I mean, how much better of a situation could he have? But you know what, Heath? I know you're the biggest believer in this, and trust me, it's not that I've come around. I've always kind of believed it, but I had to hold out a little hope. Daniel Jones can't throw a football well. He can't move an offense in the passing game. You want to see someone who really struggles even more to keep a passing game on time? Watch Will Levis try to throw a football. And this dates back to his time at Kentucky, where he was throwing for like 150 yards a game in his last season in the SEC. We're going to see, because he now has the best situation around him that he could even possibly imagine. And we'll see what happens there. But I have no faith in Will Levis to throw a football.
Let's switch over to the tight end position, and we go back to a top 12. So I probably won't get a whole lot of pushback, except for at the bottom of this list, because there are a couple of guys
what do you mean,
who I'm still holding on to that Dan, I'm sure, is not, but one of them he might like. So my top 12 tight ends, I have Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers, TJ Hawkinson, Travis Kelce, Pat Freiermuth, George Kittle, David Njoku, and Dallas Goedert. That's Laporta, McBride, Andrews, Kincaid, Pitts, Bowers, Hawkinson, Kelce, Muth, Kittle, Njoku, Goddard. Now, I don't want you to tell me which of these guys at the bottom of the top 12 you don't think should be there. Who's your guy on this list?
Okay, first of all, I want to say I can't believe you think there's anything you could do in the fantasy analysis world that will not get pushback. That's funny to me. You think that there's that, because we've been through this for so long. We know no matter what we say, we're going to get pushback. But I will say this, my guys on this list, we'll start with my number one guy on this list. It's Dalton Kincaid, who you have ranked at tight end 4. Just loved him coming out, watching his tape at Utah, just that ability to win in the intermediate level. Then thinking back to some of the film I watched last year with the Bills, I love what they did toward the end of the season. Why does that stand out to me? Well, that's when Joe Brady was there as offensive coordinator, and they started to use him more on wheel routes and in the intermediate levels and start to get him going in the vertical game. Things that Utah did that actually saw work for him on tape translate to the Bills offense that I didn't really see at the beginning of the season. Maybe that's because there was a different coordinator calling the plays for the Bills at the beginning of the season, or maybe that's because he was a rookie and he needed to get more custom with the system and with Josh Allen. But now they have a full off season to work together. I just love the upside for Dalton Kincaid as a prospect. He's a little bit older and he came out a little bit older. That does scare me a tiny bit, Heath, but I'm not even sure. He might be older than Kyle Pitts. That's how young Kyle Pitts was coming out. I don't have that for sure. I could look that up in a second, but
here's my problem. Like I hear what you're saying about Kincaid, and I believe you. And how does that work with the fact that once the offensive coordinator change was made, his receiving yards
went down
46, 38, 21, 0, 7, and then 87 and 84 at the end of the season.
Yeah, well, that's also an issue. Yeah, obviously that the end of the season was good, but that's also an issue with when they changed to Brady. They became more run heavy. They had Dawson Knox came back. He was injured during some of the time when Kincaid was getting all those targets. That's an issue, but I feel like that evolution will happen within the system, within the game, within his target totem pole, essentially, with Stephon Diggs gone and with Gabe Davis gone. That's really what I'm banking more on, kind of the evolution. Because if we're just thinking about last year, yeah, it wasn't good for him, that change yet, but it's kind of just, for me, I'm focusing more on the routes that he ran after they changed that and how that can be utilized this year as he gets more targets on those routes.
So would you rank Kincaid over Laporta, McBride, or Andrews?
The one I have trouble with is Laporta. I would definitely rank him over McBride. I'm much lower on McBride than consensus personally. And I would rank him over Andrews. Laporta is the questionable one because, man, Laporta, I'm disappointed in myself because I love what I saw from him in college. And I was like, and then I look back at last season. I'm like, this should have been obvious that he was going to do
Right.
this based on the fact that he really just didn't get a lot of volume at the college level, playing in the worst offense in college football and the most kind of like run heavy, pathetic offense. And now he finally got something good with a good corner. So I don't think I would rank him ahead of Laporta, but I would have him as my tight end too.
And then you said you had a second guy. So who is it?
Well, the other guys for me are Brock Bowers and Kyle Pitts. Those are kind of the big three for me within Dynasty at tight end. Those are the three I would want to buy right now. Those are the three I want on all my rosters. And I would have all three of those guys ahead of Trey McBride and Andrews.
So that's your top four would basically be Laporta, Kincaid, Pitts, and Bowers.
Yes.
But you're going to make Kyle Pitts like actually do something this year, or we're gonna change that, right?
Yeah,
like
this
at
is
some
it for him,
point,
right,
his
correct.
like I know you're the film guy, and we don't we can ignore some of the numbers, but he does at some point have to score fantasy points to remain inside your top three tight ends, right?
No, it could be a sharp fall for him. Like this is he has Kirk Cousins. He's supposed to be now fully healthy. Last year he was playing hurt off the knee scope, whatever. But I still remember what I saw at Florida, and it was just unbelievable to watch that type of talent. It was kind of in a lot of ways, it was better than Kincaid on tape, better than Laporta, better than McBride for sure. And Bowers is the only one it wouldn't be better than. So yeah, this has to be it though. If it's a sharp fall off after this, maybe even outside the top 12 if he can't produce this year.
And we did have a comment here because you ruined the rankings dilemma because it's Kincaid, Pitts, and Bowers. Goddard's going to be 30 this year. Tough to have him in this tier. Well, like there's multiple 30-year-olds ahead of him. It will be. I think that probably comes right back to the Jalen Hurts question: is do the Eagles get this offense fixed? And there are some guys in tier 2 that I think people would make the argument for over Goddard, but I don't have any questions about his talent. I expect the Eagles offense to be a lot better. The one that actually makes me the most nervous is David Njoku.
Yeah.
Because so much of his great finish was without Deshaun Watson.
Exactly. And Flacco, who just perfectly fits his skill set.
Right. We've seen Kevin Stefanski's offense is basically over a 25% target share for tight ends when anyone is playing quarterback except for Deshaun Watson. And then it falls to 21, 22% because Watson just hasn't thrown to his tight ends quite as often. Who is, Dan, that before we switch over, we'll take another break, but before we switch over, like who's the tight end whose name you don't see here that you think you should?
Ooh, interesting. The tight end.
So I was kind of going to steal one of your guys from the next graphic, probably.
Okay. It's going to be it's a guy you have ranked very low, but I was going to take him for the next graphic and talk about him then, but I'll talk about him a little bit now. It's Luke Musgrave, the tight end from the Packers. It's a tight end who just now, issue with Luke Musgrave is the same issue that popped up his rookie year, injuries. That was what happened to him at Oregon State. He didn't play a lot of games, but assuming he can find a way to get over that, and that's a big assumption, but if I'm going to make that assumption, the way he moves at his size, it is rare. I said that when he was coming out, and he made an impact early in the season, not just with the stats on tape. I remember breaking him down for Beyond the Box Score with Adam and Jacob, and we were showing some of the routes on the show, and we were talking about him. He was open in the vertical middle, and Jordan Love at that point was not playing good football at the beginning of the season. He was sailing passes. He was missing him. He missed him on a couple deep routes. Must have missed him on 3 deep touchdowns last year in the early part of the season. By this kind of just based on my memory, but I do remember breaking it down. And that's because he's able to get open in the intermediate middle and the vertical because of how well he can move at his size. And if you look at the, combine numbers and just the athletic testing, he's just an absolute freak of an athlete. One of the highest RAS scores of any tight end in the history of the NFL combine. Showed it last year in the beginning part of the season. That's why I like him so much. I look at this top 12 list and I think who are the most talented tight ends? That's what I like to bank on in Dynasty. I would put him right up there with a lot of the names on this list, especially in that back half of the top 12. So he would be my guy.
Here's the thing that I struggle with for both redraft and for Dynasty.
Yep.
And it's the same thing I struggle with the Packers wide receivers. But you look at last season, Luke Musgrave had 46 targets in this offense. He was hurt, missed 6 games. Tucker Kraft had 40 targets in the same offense, playing with the same quarterback. 6 fewer targets. Tucker Kraft had more receiving yards. He had more touchdowns. His success rate was much higher. His catch rate was higher. He averaged more yards per target, more yards per reception. I'm not 100% sure Luke Musgrave is better than Tucker Kraft.
Well, I really like Tucker Kraft as well. So I just want to make that clear. It's difficult when I have two talents I really like, and his tape was phenomenal as well. Just watching him against a lower level, but just the way he moves after the catch. They're totally different kind of tight ends. I think the Packers drafted them for that reason. Tucker Kraft being more the after the catch short guy, and Musgrave is more as the stretch the field guy. And that's an issue for kind of maybe a short term. But I'm just looking at this thing more long term, and I think the rarity of what Musgrave offers is a little bit more than what Kraft can offer to an NFL team. If, of course, it's a big if. Like if they can find a way to maximize that talent and utilize it in an NFL offense, which we've seen teams do, like with some of these tight ends over the years that have been really successful as intermediate and vertical weapons at the NFL level. Rob Gronkowski type comes to mind. Like that's kind of where I can see, minus the blocking, where I can see Luke Musgrave really if he hits the ceiling. So I'm just more of a ceiling play for me for sure. There's boom bust there. There's immediate fantasy success I have to worry about, like you said, so many targets, but it's a long-term thing for me. And it may even be better to buy him next year at this time, right? Like that type of thing, because he's still really young. I believe he came out at 21 years old, Luke Musgrave. So just more of a bet on talent kind of guy for me.
Let's take one more break, and then we'll get into the I've got to argue with the chat about Evan Ingram.
From the world of Sonic the Hedgehog, is there anyone stronger?
No.
Tougher?
No.
Hungrier?
Grapes was an interesting choice for someone who doesn't use fingers.
Knuckles, now streaming only on Paramount Plus.
Okay, we're ready for tight end 13 through 24, and Andrew is really not happy that
Why?
Evan Ingram was not on the first graphic. Let's show the second graphic so we can see Evan Ingram. I've got Jake Ferguson, Cole Kmet, Evan Ingram, Chig Okonkwo, Dalton Schultz, Ben Sinnott, Jatavian Sanders, Noah Fant, Luke Musgrave, Theo Johnson, Michael Mayer, and why not go with the guy the Chiefs just drafted, Jared Wiley at number 24. No Evan Ingram on the first graphic. Evan Ingram does make the second graphic. He is also turning 30 years old this year, so there is a little bit of an age concern. Andrew brings up the point, didn't he have 20 more receptions than the number 2? And now Calvin Ridley's gone? Well, yes, but you have to look at what happened after Christian Kirk got hurt last year, because Calvin Ridley, Brian Thomas, Zay Jones, those guys are not impacting Evan Ingram's targets. But Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram work in a very similar part of the field. And we saw, but he was very involved before the Kirk injury. I don't want to minimize that. I believe he was on pace for something like 99 catches. He had a 10-target game in week 8. He had 4 straight 8-target games before that. Very good. But after Kirk went down, it was 9 catches on 9 targets, 11 catches on 12 targets, 4 on 6, 10 on 15, 10 on 13. Like his full season statistics from last year are heavily impacted by the fact that when Christian Kirk went down, Ingram became the guy over the middle to a larger extent. And I don't think we should expect that this year. And if he's just a mid tight end 7 or 8 at 30 years old, then it's tougher to get him into the top 12.
I'm with you on Evan Ingram, Heath. I wouldn't have him in my top 12. And I think the age factor is being underrated here. Like you mentioned, he's an older prospect for this position. Also, earlier in his career with the Giants, he had an injury history. He's been able to avoid that lately. But if we're to assume that Brian Thomas is going to be a big part of this offense moving forward at some point, if not in 2024, which I think is very fair to assume based on the draft capital he used on him and based on some of the early reports we've already seen from camp and some of the glowing reports we've heard from some of the coaches there, that is going to be a detractor for Evan Ingram overall. And I love what you talked about with Christian Kirk last year when he was in versus he was out. When he was out with the injury, we're not going to expect him to be injured every year. So, yeah, I'm with you. And maybe it's redraft. I'll have him higher. Sure. But
for sure. Redraft, he is a top 8 tight end for him.
And that's fine. But Dynasty, it's a little scarier than people are giving it credit for.
Who is your guy on this list? If not, after I already took Luke Musgrave away from you.
Well, it would be Luke Musgrave. If I'm going to pick another guy from this list, it would probably be Ben Sinnott. Ben Sinnott is a guy who almost identically, from an athletic standpoint, relative athletic score, profiles to Sam Laporta. His game doesn't look exactly like Laporta's on film. I mean, Laporta after the catch at Iowa was just absolutely phenomenal. Ben Sinnott has that, but not to that level. He's not that same level, just, bull in a cage type after the catch guy. But What he does have is really good change of direction skills after the catch. And that's the type of stuff that excites me from a fantasy standpoint, because that's how you create yardage and that's how you become a featured part of your offense. Has a new quarterback who's really exciting as well. That has to help as well. Obviously, I'm not as sold on, and I don't really understand why am I forgetting his name? The former Arizona Cardinals coach, who's now their offensive coordinator. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name.
Cliff Kingsbury.
Kingsbury. I'm not really understanding why Kingsbury got another job in the NFL. I thought he did a terrible job in Arizona, a terrible job with Mahomes at Texas Tech, among other things. I didn't like his offense at USC either. But hopefully he can figure it out now in his fourth go around with another quarterback. But regardless, that Sinnott talent is undeniable. So if I'm just looking at this list, it would probably be Sinnott for me. I love Michael Mayer coming out, but it's so much harder to get excited about him fantasy-wise now that Brock Bowers is there.
Yeah, the Sinnott one, like, we're probably going to be frustrated because Zach Ertz is probably going to be the lead tight end for at least the first half of the year. But we don't expect a whole lot from rookie tight ends anyway. I have a really hard time between Sanders and Sinnott. And I'm basically just trying to like take one of them in one rookie draft and take the other one in the next one, because I don't really want to make a bet there. It almost seems like there's more immediate opportunity for Sanders. Either one of those guys could end up in the top 12 by the end of this year, and I wouldn't be that surprised about it. Either one of those guys could be outside of the top 24 in the next year, and I wouldn't be that surprised about it. Let's talk about two guys who were almost in the top 12 for me, at least. And I probably shouldn't even ask you about this ranking, Stallone, because one of them went to Wisconsin. And so that's probably the easy choice. But Jake Ferguson at number 13 versus Cole Kmet at number 14. Surprisingly, very close in age. Ferguson was better last year. Kmet has a whole bunch of more target competition coming in this year. But Kmet's generally been viewed as the better football player and the better prospect for the entirety of their lives. Who would you have, Ferguson or Kmet?
Yeah, despite I'm going against my own ties to Wisconsin Badgers, I'm going to go with Cole Kmet here. I'll first start with Ferguson. I think always knew at Wisconsin he was going to be an NFL player. He was held back by bad quarterback play there, bad system, and he's proven it at the NFL level. My issues with Ferguson moving forward are, one, they did draft Luke Schoonmaker in the second round last year, and they really liked him. And I know he was injured last year to start the year. People are now down on him. No one's thinking about him. But I don't think they use that kind of draft capital, the Cowboys, for no reason. So that scares me. Two, they got massive salary cap concerns to the point where they're going to have to let go of either Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb, or Dak Prescott. They cannot fit all three. And that might be Prescott at this point. So if we're starting the quarterback cycle there, that scares me. On the other hand, Cole Kmet gets one of my favorite quarterback prospects I've ever studied, literally ever studied, in Caleb Williams. I am that high on Caleb Williams, which we didn't get to discuss earlier. I know you thought that would be my guy based on some of the drafts we've done already, but there were other guys in that tier. So I'm going to take Cole Kmet here with Caleb Williams, pairing him with Caleb Williams, and I just kind of love that for him.
Yeah, I think that the fit with him makes sense. The target crunch is really hard to figure out. And I was surprised, like Jake Ferguson's played 2 seasons in the NFL. Cole Kmet's played 4. Kmet's actually still younger than Jake Ferguson. So no concerns there. It just might take a different, like it might have to wait until Keenan Allen's gone, because it's hard for me to figure out how Keenan Allen and Cole Kmet really function within the same offense very well, unless Kmet just scores the touchdowns. One more guy I wanted to hit on here for people who are contenders and looking for a tight end. Do you think Dalton Schultz could be a top 12 tight end this year? Or again, because they added Stephon Diggs, there are too many mouths to feed in that offense?
I mean, look, the Texans were really pass heavy last year, and that was a little bit surprising to some, I think, based on Bobby Slowick and where he comes from with the 49ers. But I think when you have a quarterback of that level caliber, you kind of change maybe what you were planning to do going into the season. I think that's exactly what happened with CJ Stroud. They're like, he's just too good. We got to go play action heavy, lean on the pass. So I still think they're going to be probably top 6, top 5 in pass attempts, pass yardage, all of those things. So there is more of a pie to eat into. But you're right. You add Stephon Diggs to that mix, it makes it really difficult for me to see where Schultz stands out outside of the touchdowns and in the red zone. I still think there is opportunity for him to be in the top 12. That's kind of the state of the tight end. But that does scare me a lot that they added Stephon Diggs. I'm going to be honest.
That's going to do it for quarterback rankings and tight end rankings. Dan, thanks for coming back. Everybody always likes it when you're here. We got to hear about your guys. What do you got coming up next?
I love being here and got a lot of exciting things coming up next. We're doing a show next week on the CBS Sports Network. I'm going to be on it. So I'm very, very excited for that. For the first time, I'll be on that. We're going to be talking. I don't know yet. We're going to be talking about it. It's a surprise. So we'll see what happens there. And we've got a lot of good content coming up on the site as well. So check out that. We're going to have more mock drafts, more dynasty content. Heath has been crushing it from that standpoint for us. So just keep it locked and loaded. I know it's a little bit of a dead time for fantasy football, but it's never dead. It's always fun to talk fantasy, always fun to talk NFL. And for dynasty, it's year round. So we're having a good time with that. Also, one thing I want to shout out, one more thing. We have a new writer for CBS/Sportsline, Megan Shoop, and she is doing best ball content. And we have been a little dry on the best ball front, I feel like, through the last couple of years. So we're now finally starting to dip our toes into that. And she is a very exciting writer, and she's had a lot of success in the best ball world. So check out her content. We have a teaser article out right now on CBS Sportsline with her rankings, and on CBS Sports. And on Sportsline, you can find all her rankings for best ball. So just some things to look into. So thanks for having me on again, though, Heath. I love being on here.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, Dan. Thank you to everybody who was in the chat listening on the podcast. May have a slightly altered schedule next week, but follow us here on YouTube, follow me on Twitter, and we'll keep you abreast of what we'll be doing next week. We will talk to you then. Thanks.